Alright guys, so here's the review of the San Martin SN0137G. So this is something a little bit different from the previous San Martins I've been reviewing recently, which have all been on bracelets and have been either dive watches or like sportier watches, some of which you can see down here. If you haven't seen the reviews for them, I'll leave a link to them up at the top, and I'll also leave a link to the playlist down in the description as well for all the San Martin watches I've reviewed so far. But getting back to this one, let's quickly pop the watch to one side for a second. So it comes in their standard new packaging now, which you've probably seen before, so we'll get this out of the way and get right down to the watch. And here it is. So they do two different colours with this one. The one I've got here, they're calling retro green, and the other one is a matte black. But although it doesn't say it in the name, this green one is actually a matte finish as well. But before we get into any more details on it, let's go over the dimensions first. So we've got a diameter of 38mm, thickness of 11.6mm, lug width is coming in at 18, and when it comes to the all-important lug to lug, that's coming in at 45mm. And then in terms of weight on this supplied nylon strap, it's coming in at about 73 grams. So seeing as we're talking about it, let's go into the strap in a bit more detail, because it is quite an interesting one. So starting with the buckle, get a zoom in on this so you can see it a bit more clearly. So we've got the San Martin branding on there, as you can see, and it's also a really nice bead-blasted finish as well, which is matching the case, which I'll show you in a second. As for the rest of the strap, got these nice leather keepers, one of which is fixed, the other one is floating. Stitching's all nicely done, no issues there. It's a nice soft strap as well, not too thick either. Then flicking around to the other end, again we've got the leather bits on there as well, so around the holes so it won't fray, and then the end piece as well. Again, nicely stitched. And it just adds something a little bit different, just adds a little bit of interest for what could otherwise be a pretty boring plain strap. Moving on to the head of the watch, as I said, bead blasted finish, and the first thing you're probably going to notice is that we've got drilled lugs, which is really nice, always good to see. So swapping out the strap won't be a problem if you do want to change it. And then we've got that signed San Martin hexagonal logo on the crown, and then we've got that pretty interesting case shape as well. Just flows nicely up to the crystal, and then we've got those fairly chunky lugs there, which as I said, are drilled. When it comes to the case back, it's a sterile case back, so I'm not going to show you that, but it is screw down. So let's get onto the dial. So as I said at the start, this is the green dial version, but it is a quite dark green. Depending on the angle you get it at, sometimes it can look almost black. It matches the strap quite nicely. And if you go for the black dial version, I think that comes with a black strap. So we've got a fully printed dial, nothing applied. So you've got the San Martin branding at the top, and then down just above the 6, we've got that automatic. And then, as you can probably see, we've got the numbers 1 to 12, and then we've also got the 24-hour ones just on the inside of that as well. Then we've got that minute track, which again is just printed, and then those yellow triangles on the outside of the numbers. So quite a busy dial, quite a lot going on there. So I'm glad that they kept the text to a minimum. So when it comes to the numbers 1 to 12, you might be able to see in the macro shot, they actually look almost applied. That's because they've got that many layers of Lume on there that they have actually raised up a bit. So it'll be interesting to see what the Lume's like when we get to that a bit later on. When it comes to the hands, got nice proportions on all of them, and on the hour and minute hand you can see we've got that yellow matching the triangles around the outside on the minute track, and then we've got the same on the head of the second hand as well. Otherwise the second hand is actually white, as is the border on the hour and minute hand too. So it does contrast nicely against that dial. Then we've got that nice flat crystal there, got a decent amount of AR on it as well, so that is working well, nice and legible. But the question is it sapphire? Let's check that out now and find out. Using the trusty diamond selector too. And yep, we've got sapphire crystal, always good to see. So obviously we don't have a bezel on this, so now let's get onto the movement and talk about that. So you probably guessed, yep, got an NH35, so if we unscrew the crown, which is slightly recessed, which you can see a bit better now I'm zoomed in. So if we zoom back out, and then we'll get back to it. So because this is an NH35, we do actually have a ghost date because we don't have a date window on this one. So if I pull it out to the first position, you'll see it doesn't stop the second hand. And if we turn it, you will maybe hear that click, the date wheel turning over. So if we pull it out to the second position, the second hand will stop. So we do have hacking, and then obviously we can just change the time. Pop it back in, second hand will re-engage. All works well. And then hand winding, the usual stuff with the NH35. And again, screw down that crown and it will slightly recess. So it just gives it a slightly cleaner look when it is screwed in. So now it's time to get onto the Lume. See if it's any good with it being a fully printed dial. See if that thick layer I was talking about on the 1 to 12 is going to make a big difference. So we've got a bit there already, but let's charge it up, give it a proper chance. And there we go. So you can see really glowing brightly initially. You might not be able to tell straight away, hopefully the camera will adjust in a second, but we've actually got two different types of Lume on here. So on the hands and the markers around the outside we've got C3, but on those numbers 1 to 12 we've actually got BGWX1. So much so that it makes it look like it's almost got applied indices because there's that many layers, as I showed you before. So considering we've got two different types of Lume, it's actually looking pretty consistent across them. So no patchiness at all, and as I say, fairly consistent despite having different types of Lume and also different colours because of the different Lumes they're using. But the main question is, what's the longevity like? Let's speed this up a bit now and find out. So initially, not too much of a change. You can see more clearly now the difference between the BGWX1 and the C3 though. But in terms of longevity of both, still looking pretty good. And it pretty much stays at that same kind of level when we go on a little bit longer as well. So surprisingly good Lume considering it's a fully printed dial and nothing applied. And also that C3 hanging in well considering it's up against BGWX1. I thought it might have faded sooner, but they seem to be fading at the same kind of rate, which is good to see. So all that's left to do now is show you what it's like on wrist, go over the pros and cons, and then we'll wrap this up and you can decide whether you want to pick one up or not. And here it is on my 7-inch wrist. So first thing to mention, I'm on the third to last hole, so if you've got a smaller than 7-inch wrist, that's something to bear in mind. But it is a nice soft comfortable strap. And again, with those leather pieces, I think it just adds that extra little bit of something. And again, it suits this green dial version perfectly, I think. It is a good looking piece and really legible, but there are a few little things that I would change. So it's nice to have those drilled lugs, but you can see with the strap being underneath this, that adds a little bit to the thickness. So it's already fairly thick. Perhaps they could have used something like a VH movement or something and got that case thickness down a bit. That would have been quite nice, and then you'd still get that kind of smooth sweep almost. But that's pretty much it when it comes to the issues. That, and obviously if you've got a smaller than 7-inch wrist, as I said, that strap could be an issue, but you can always change it out. I really like the bead blasted finish on the case and the matching buckle as well. That is nice. You've got really good Lume as well, considering it's a fully printed dial, and as I say, really legible. You've got that flat sapphire crystal with a good amount of AR on it, and then that usable 100-meter water resistance as you'd expect for this kind of style of watch. So overall, I think it's a pretty good package, and something a little bit different than the usual San Martin watches I check out. So if you are interested in picking one up still, link will be down in the description. That is an affiliate link, it does help support the channel, but you don't pay any extra. But that's it for this one guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.